Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this because today we are taking on a massive, literally epic scope. We're looking at the foundation and the continuous cycle of one of the world's absolutely most influential civilizations. We are talking about Greece. We're tracing a story that spans over 5,000 years of recorded history, and it's marked by this wild, fascinating rhythm of rising, falling, and then rebuilding over and over again. Here's our roadmap. We're going to travel through 5 distinct eras. The first Greek civilizations, the classical Golden Age, from Alexander to Rome, Byzantium and Ottoman rule, and finally, the birth of modern Greece. Let's get started. Section 1. The first Greek civilizations, the dawn of the Bronze Age. Now, before this timeline even officially begins, human habitation in Greece actually dates back a staggering 210,000 years. They found the oldest Homo sapiens skull outside of Africa, right there in the country. But charting the rise of what we call civilization, we see the first farming settlements popping up around 7,000 BCE in places like Sesklo. Then, let's move forward and see how this builds. We leap to 3000 BCE with the striking art of the Cycladic culture. By 2000 BCE, the highly advanced Minoans are building these massive palaces, followed by Mycenaean dominance until, well, it all comes crashing down around 1100 BCE. But just look at that immense leap from simple Neolithic farmers to highly complex palace societies. Those Minoans of Crete are particularly fascinating. They built Europe's very first true palace complexes, like the famous site at Knossos. And what's really interesting here is the artwork. Look closely at the vivid colors and the incredibly naturalistic style. They created these joyful, peaceful scenes depicting blue monkeys, dolphins, and literally athletes leaping right over bowls. It reflects a super vibrant society that dominated trade across the Mediterranean, and they seemingly did it without relying on heavy militarization. But, they weren't alone for long. If we contrast the Minoans with the Mycenaeans, we see a really dramatic shift. While the Minoans were island-based, peaceful traders using an undeciphered script we call Linear A, the Mycenaeans were mainlanders. They built these massive, imposing fortresses, had a heavily militaristic culture, and wrote in Linear B. And get this, Linear B actually has been deciphered, and it's an early form of Greek. These are the expansionist warriors tied to legendary figures like King Agamemnon, the very people whose exploits at Troy still echo through Homer's epic poems that we're still reading today. Moving on to Section 2, the classical Golden Age, from Dark Ages to democracy. So following that really mysterious Bronze Age collapse, Greece entered a Dark Age. But their recovery? It was basically a rapid cultural explosion. Around 800 BCE, the Greeks adopted the Phoenician alphabet, revolutionized it by adding vowels, and boom, we see the emergence of the polis, or the independent city-state. Now, despite being fragmented into hundreds of fiercely independent city-states, the Greeks actually united through shared pan-Hellenic events. In 776 BCE, they held the very first Olympic Games. This forged a shared identity that was absolutely crucial when they eventually had to unite to fight off the massive invasions of the Persian Empire between 490 and 479 BCE. That victory against Persia was achieved largely through a really uneasy alliance between two radically different superpowers, Athens and Sparta. Athens was the birthplace of democracy, a total naval powerhouse and a buzzing center of art and intellect. Sparta, on the flip side, was this austere, heavily militaristic society with an absolutely unmatched land army. They united to save Greece, sure, but their total inability to actually coexist afterward led to the devastating 27-year Peloponnesian War. Sparta eventually won that, but it left the whole Greek world completely exhausted. However, right before that devastating war, in this tiny, brief window between defeating the Persians and fighting the Spartans, Athens experienced something miraculous, the Golden Age of Pericles. Funded by their defensive alliance, the Delian League, Athens completely transformed. Guys, this is the exact moment that gave the world the foundational pillars of Western culture. You've got Socrates questioning absolutely everything in the Agora, Sophocles and Euripides basically inventing tragedy in the theater of Dionysus, and the breathtaking structures of the Acropolis, like the Parthenon being raised up to the sky. It was just a brief, blazing moment of pure cultural genius. All right, Section 3, from Alexander to Rome, the Age of Empires. So, that exhaustion of the southern city-states, it had huge consequences. It basically allowed a northern kingdom, Macedonia, to sweep right down and unite Greece under King Philip II. But it was his son who completely changed the world. Alexander the Great succeeded his father at just 20 years old. By the time he died at 32, he had conquered an empire stretching all the way from Egypt to India. The speed of that is just breathtaking. But the crucial point here is not just the military conquest, it's the cultural one. Alexander's campaigns successfully exported Greek culture, institutions, and the common Greek language, the Koine, across the entire Eastern Mediterranean and Near East. This sparked the Hellenistic period, which was this massive era of scientific and scholarly achievement, giving us things like the Library of Alexandria and mathematical giants like Archimedes. Check out the massive geopolitical shifts that followed. Alexander's empire fractured into Hellenistic successor kingdoms, and they lasted until Rome methodically conquered them, officially taking Greece in 146 BC. But here's the twist. Rome was completely captivated by its new province. As the poet Horace famously said, "Captive Greece took its fierce conqueror captive." Greek culture just permeated the Roman elite. And when the Roman Empire later split, the eastern half, centered in Constantinople from 330 AD onward, essentially evolved into the thousand-year Byzantine Empire. It was deeply Roman in its law, but fundamentally Greek in its culture and language. Which brings us to Section 4, Byzantium and Ottoman rule, the Long Middle Ages. This era is a remarkably long period where Greece was administered by multi-ethnic empires. Looking at the timeline, Constantinople stood as the ultimate beacon of Greek heritage for over a millennium. It survived a brutal sacking during the Fourth Crusade in 1204, but finally fell to the Ottoman Empire in 1453. From that point on, the Greeks endured nearly 400 years of Ottoman rule. Think about that. Over those centuries, without a sovereign state of their own, the Greek identity, the language, the sense of community, it was all fiercely preserved and kept alive, largely through the institutions and traditions of Orthodox Christianity. And now, Section 5, Birth of Modern Greece, Rise, Fall, and Rebirth. After 4 full centuries, the pendulum of this 5,000-year cycle finally swings back toward rebirth. In 1821, the Greek War of Independence broke out. This was a grueling, incredibly brutal struggle, and this brilliantly illustrates the sheer power of history. The rebels intentionally revived ancient terms to describe themselves. They adopted the name Hellenes and called their country Hellas, drawing a direct, intentional line right back to the classical era. This wasn't just some local uprising, it sparked a massive wave of Philhellenism across Europe and America. That international sympathy eventually led to heavy military intervention from Great Britain, France, and Russia, who stepped in and helped turn the tide of the war. The diplomatic culmination of all that struggle is captured perfectly in the 1830 London Protocol. Signed by the great powers, it officially recognized the complete independence of the modern Greek state. Shortly after that, in 1832, a Bavarian prince named Otto was actually installed as the first king of Greece. This established a new kingdom and marked Greece's official, triumphant return to the map of Europe as a sovereign nation. But the story doesn't just stop at independence. The 20th century intensely tested the resilience of the Greek people. They rapidly expanded their territory during the Balkan Wars, then endured a horrific Axis occupation and famine during World War II, which was immediately followed by a totally devastating civil war. Later, they lived under a 7-year military junta. Yet despite immense hardship, including a severe financial debt crisis right here in the 21st century, the Greek nation continually rebuilds itself. They ultimately integrated into the European Union in 1981 and firmly established a modern working democracy. Today, contemporary Greece is a thriving parliamentary republic. It's home to roughly 11 million people. It's a nation that is deeply, fundamentally connected to its ancient heritage, literally walking the very same stones as Pericles and Alexander. Yet it is absolutely firmly planted in the realities and the triumphs of the modern world. So I want to leave you with this question to chew on. How does the weight of 5,000 years of rising, falling, and rebuilding shape the identity of a modern 21st century nation? When your ancestors laid the bedrock of Western civilization, survived the collapse of massive empires, and continuously reinvented themselves over millennia, well, history isn't just something you casually read in a textbook. It's something you live every single day. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.